Most drummers think they hit a wall at around 140 BPM because they aren't talented enough. But that is a lie. The real reason your legs freeze up is that just one muscle group is too weak. Once you train it properly, you will be able to play at those tempos with ease. I personally spent years fighting my own body until I realized that the answer wasn't on the pedals at all. It was actually on the floor wearing ankle weights. Today I'm going to show you how to break through that 130 to 160 BPM no man's land forever. First, we're going to expose the hybrid myth that is keeping you stuck. Second, I'll show you the exact floor exercise my students use to improve their hip flexor strength and endurance. And third, I'll give you the anti-cheat pedal setup to transfer that power to your drum kit. To understand why this works, we first have to look at the no man's land that kills most drummers' progress. I'm quite sure almost every drummer at one point struggles with double bass drumming between 130 to 160 BPM. That's exactly the transition point where your upper leg starts to freeze, seize up, and you cannot keep up with the metronome any longer. It feels like nervous twitching almost, and suddenly your body shifts the full workload to your lower legs. This is exactly when your hip flexors are hitting their current speed limit. For some drummers, it starts at 130 BPM, others get up to 140 or 150, but actually at one point it happens to almost everyone. All right, now let's talk about the hybrid myth, why 70-30 ratios don't work. Be honest, have you seen advice given online from drummers that tell you at a slow tempo, at first you start out with, for example, an 80-20 ratio, so 80% using your upper leg, at 20% just using your lower leg when playing double bass, for example, at 110 BPM. Then once you increase to 120, you want to switch to a 70-30 ratio. Then at 130, you're going to switch to 60%, 40%, and so on. Actually, this almost sounds like a joke, and I have to laugh out loud right here, because tell this to a drummer who's been struggling with double bass drumming for years, who's stuck at 130 or 140 for years, and then you got a teacher that tells him to just, it's all easy, just switch from a 80-20 ratio to a 70-30 ratio between upper and lower leg. It's just impossible mid-song when you're struggling with double bass drumming to switch between muscle groups like that. And by the way, in the past, this was known as the regular heel up technique, a mix of upper and lower leg. Now drum teachers have come up with a new fancy term for this technique. Now it's called the hybrid technique. All right, now let's talk about the real problem right here, which is hip flexor fatigue. Your hip flexors are responsible to lifting your full leg off the ground. The main problem right here is that we are not used to using this muscle group this way. So this muscle group is actually fatiguing really quickly. And once it fatigues, your body will automatically shift the full workload to your lower leg when playing double bass. That's a problem at those tempos around 130 to 150 or 160 BPM. Because it's really, really difficult to control your pedals at those tempos just using your lower leg. What's happening when you're struggling with those tempos is actually the following. Maybe you start out at a slow tempo, let's say 100 or 110 beats per minute. You're playing solid and your hip flexors can still keep up. Once you increase the tempo further to 120 or 130 BPM, at one point, your hip flexors just get exhausted and your body panics. This is exactly when you start to speed up uncontrollably. Your feet feel like they're twitching. Your upper leg is tense. And you are actually, some of my students even are leaning forward or back. They somehow try to keep up with the metronome, but it's just not working out. The good news is that it's actually not that difficult to train your hip flexors and get them up to speed. And that's what we're going to focus on right now. All right, now it's time to talk about the floor first solution, which are ankle weights. First of all, when you're starting out, we recommend ankle weights between 1.5 to 2 kilograms per foot. That's more than enough. Don't go heavier than that. The great benefit you get from working out with ankle weights on the floor is that you train your hip flexors effectively, and it's way easier to keep your lower leg out of the mix. At this point, we don't want to incorporate our lower leg to push off the ground. Our approach to this is really simple. It's like hitting the gym. Basically, you're just training one muscle group every other day, and quickly you will find out that you get way stronger. Next, let's talk about the right starting tempo. For us, we start at 70 beats per minute, 16 notes on the floor while wearing ankle weights. The goal here is just to build hip flexor strength and endurance. That's it, nothing else. Starting out this slow makes it way easier to store the right motion to your muscle memory. So 70 BPM in the beginning is perfectly fine, then increase to 80, 90, and so on. So now you might be thinking, okay, Marthyn, really easy to practice on the floor, but the difficulty is transitioning to the pedals while sticking to the same technique. That's what we're going to cover right now. Now let's continue with our anti-cheat pedal setup. Keep in mind that our goal here is to make the transition from the floor to your pedals as easy as possible. So these are the settings that have worked best for our students in our drum camp. First of all, beta angle, 30 to 35 degrees. A smaller beta angle makes learning the flat foot technique easier. It's just easier to control your pedals this way. I know that when I talked about the ankle technique in the past, I always recommended a 45-degree beta angle when first starting out. For the flat foot technique, it's a bit different. So 30 to 35 degrees works perfectly fine. Next, let's talk about the footboard angle. We want to go for a flat footboard. A steep footboard angle is an invitation for your lower leg to take over, to start pushing down with the front part of your foot. You want to allow your foot to land flat on the footboard, and that's just way easier with a flat footboard angle. The main goal right here is to make the transition from floor to your pedals as easy as possible. We don't want to allow our lower leg to help out. Full workload has to be on your hip flexors. And yes, in the beginning, you're going to really feel that muscle group. They're going to be fatigued. They're going to hurt. Perfectly fine. They're going to get stronger really quickly. Now to finish this video, I want to give you some short tips. First of all, stop practicing slow, start practicing right. I'm sure you have seen the advice given online to just start out slow and then keep on practicing slow. At one point, you will be fine and you will be able to increase the tempo automatically. What we have learned in our drum camp is that, yes, with the flat foot technique, you can start at a really slow tempo. Again, 70 BPM works great for us. But at one point, you really got to start pushing your limits. So yes, you can start out at a slow tempo, but always push your speed limits and exhaust that one muscle group. You really have to train that specific engine required for that tempo. And next, consistency is even more important than intensity. We recommend to follow the MED, minimum effective dose principle. So if you practice every other day for 20 to 30 minutes and really exhausted one muscle group, you are going to improve. And actually, you will be amazed how quickly you will break through that speed barrier between 130 to 160 BPM. Our students have achieved the best results with short, focused practice sessions, not 8-hour-long marathon sessions once per week. And that's it for this video. I hope you found this useful. I wish you a great day. Cheers from Vienna. Bye-bye.